Good day, dear friends. Today we will introduce you to one of the finest diplomats, a person, a former ambassador who has been very upfront, nationalistic, and who even spoke out in the presence of her bosses when it came to protecting what she considered as national interest or a position of principle. Yes, today we have with us Ambassador Tasneem Aslam, who has served also as the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we welcome Tasneem Aslam, and my first question to you will be, how does geopolitics compromise the rule of law, good governance, and issues of integrity of leaders with which major powers have been dealing with? Major powers do provide a lot of financial support to developing countries such as Pakistan for improving the rule of law, good governance. But can you tell us how much does this support conflict with the actions on ground that these powers require of a country like Pakistan?
Ostensibly, they are committed to human rights, rule of law. You hear about that in their engagement with every government, not just in Pakistan, across the board. Egypt would be a good example, Pakistan for that matter, and many other countries. At the same time, they prefer to deal with individuals, strong individuals, not necessarily representing the public aspirations and public sentiment. Morsi was an elected leader, but they did not accept him, and they made sure. Obviously, they will say that there was an Arab Spring and there was a movement and all that, and subsequently people rose up against him. But we know that how these movements are run in developing countries. And then Sisi came in. So in Pakistan also we have had interludes of democracy and then military rule.
But what do you say, Ambassador, of the nations which routinely issue state of human rights reports about countries like Pakistan, but themselves are involved in similar actions like internationally impermissible Guantanamo Bay prison for Al-Qaeda and Taliban, like the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq, and so many other things? Don't you think there is an inherent contradiction?
Not just that, they are the biggest violators of human rights. I mean, go back to the US emergence of United States of America as a country. It's seeped in blood. We talk about US being discovered by so and so and so. No, it wasn't a virgin continent discovered by the white Europeans. It was a populated place. And where are those people today? There was a genocide. So a country that was established and in whose foundation there is blood, you can't expect much from them in terms of commitment to human rights. There are individuals who are very, very committed to Americans, ordinary people. As a nation, they are very humane, very kind people. But the ruling structure is very cruel.
Ambassador, most of the Western countries led by the United States often talk of the human rights, rule of law, but they themselves start looking the other way when it comes to their own national interests. Is that true?
It is to perpetuate their power. What they are doing today with China and the policy they are pursuing and the aggression you see, it's not because China is that evil state that US needs to take on. You look at their history for a long, long time since it became the superpower. They have identified an enemy that could possibly pose a threat to them in future, and they have gone after it. Soviet Union, And when the Soviet Union was disintegrating, they were already identifying the next enemy. If you read the writings of neocons and others, in early 90s, they were talking about Islam as the next enemy. And we saw what happened subsequently. Now that they have demolished what was left of the Islamic Muslim world, now China is the next enemy, and you hear them talk about China doing this. You hear this day in and day out, these sermons about human rights and respect for human rights and equality of people. In their own society, people are not equal. But there you have censorship now. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all these big engines of communication can remove you like this. And on what? Certain things that you say. For instance, so far, up till now, you cannot speak against the government, present government, Democrats. You cannot talk about Israel, you cannot criticize Israel. Even in case of India, there was a time till last year, when Modi did us a favor. Before that, anyone saying something against India, and they would be blocked.
But would you say that part of the blame also goes to former presidents, prime ministers, and their associates when we talk of how the Americans, the Marines in particular, were coming in and out of Pakistan with impunity?
Some certain things were negotiated, I think, primarily through military channels, but they were specific. For instance, we know that the Air Force stood its ground on what they will give and what they will not give. But this information was not shared with the whole of the government. I don't think the Foreign Office knew about the details. Some things, when it became operational, some information started trickling in. That okay, this they have been permitted, this they have not been permitted. I'll give an example. Noor Khan Air Base, at that time it was Chaklala base. It was not part of the Operation Enduring Freedom. But since the Air Force didn't know and there was confusion, this information was not they started operating there. They used the Noor Khan base to not only, they were allowed to transit to Afghanistan through Noor Khan base, but they were not allowed to bring in any cargo or anything. And because of that information vacuum, they started claiming it as an OEF base. Things came to a head when a US officer pulled a gun and said that this is my corridor. And they contacted me that why are you allowing them to bring this cargo? The vehicles are coming in and they are bringing stuff, and I said, what cargo? They are only allowed to transit to Afghanistan. And they said, no, but on average 5-10 flights come every day, and they bring some vehicles and they take out the stuff, and they say that this is OEF. I said, and how are these flights landing? Because we have no information. And they waved at them from a distance the agreement, which is a normal thing, in principle agreement that you can allow a country's military aircraft to land.
So the Americans basically used the Noor Khan base without authority, but apparently with the collusion of certain people on ground. Were they also bringing in weapons and other surveillance systems without the knowledge of the Pakistani authorities?
One day I received a call from the Air Force base that a flight has arrived with cargo on board. I looked at the permission request that had come in from the US Embassy, and it mentioned nothing. Cargo nil. They said, okay, confiscate it. And then they started protesting that our diplomatic bag has been confiscated. And I said, look, diplomatic bag comes to the airport, Islamabad airport, not to the base. And secondly, the upper limit for a diplomatic bag is 250 kg, and it has been communicated to you by protocol, our protocol division, again and again. So it can't be a diplomatic bag. 18,000 kg is not diplomatic bag. The second time, while declaring there was no cargo on board, cargo was brought in. The Air Force people seized it, and they said that, okay, last time you authorized us to confiscate it, we have done it. I said, okay, this time open it. They opened it, and there was surveillance equipment and some weapons, etc. And the explanation we got from the US Embassy was that this was meant for Iraq and it landed here by mistake. I said, well, very logical, because after all, Pakistan is from the US on the way to Iraq, so it can happen.
But Ambassador, it looks like you must have annoyed many officials, your bosses, and even diplomats by bringing up these issues and by standing up to them.
Yes, the US ambassador called me a terrorist as well. So I said, I'm a terrorist with terrorists. So the matter ended it. It was a joke, I said. So I was also joking. I worked for Pakistan, and I would give a lot of credit to those officers at the air base who were very vigilant and felt that zeal to stop this kind of abuse.
What do you say to the fact that the Americans, particularly the Marines, got so emboldened when they felt like being in their own country and without any regard for Pakistan's sovereignty?
The fact that they got everything they wished for, so they thought that they put Pakistan on the defensive, and by going around claiming that some money was transferred from here and there, or that Taliban are based in Pakistan and they are killing Americans, all sorts of things. And instead of, I think we should have stood our ground.
Ambassador, can you tell us how do these contradictions impact your diplomacy and the perceptions basically of a country? For example, about a country that has spent $2.6 trillion in Afghanistan, over $1.5 trillion in Iraq, but does not enjoy a favorable position in these countries. I'm talking about the United States. So what would you say to that?
First, if you barge into somebody's house and tell them, I'll teach you how you should live your life, no matter how much you spend, the residents of that place are not going to appreciate you. Secondly, count the lives, number of people killed, innocent people who had nothing to do with any violence anywhere. Saddam may have been a cruel ruler, but he guaranteed people's lives and livelihood. Iraq is now in 3 parts, and it's still not peaceful. They have ripped apart these societies. They have killed people, and the money they spent is spent on armaments, not so much on development. If the Americans leave Afghanistan to its own devices, all those English-speaking, sophisticated people who you have been interacting with will disappear from there, and they would have hefty bank accounts back home, from there they came. How much of this money was spent on people in Afghanistan or people in Iraq? Not much. How much of it was spent on weapons? They got very upset, said that the number of daisy cutters that Americans are raining on Afghanistan, had they spent that much money after the Soviet withdrawal, Afghanistan would have been a different country. And then talk about oil. How much benefit did the US get in oil? They only mention the amount they have spent. They don't talk about the amount they have earned. Afghanistan was a poppy-free country when Americans attacked and landed here. Look at Afghanistan today.
This also brings us to the issue of counter-radicalization, terrorism. Would you say that these are things that basically were raised as an industry on the back of military interventions in Iraq, in Afghanistan?
If you go back to initiative BAMINA, Broader Middle East and North Africa Initiative, which started from North Africa till Pakistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, these countries. What was that initiative? Redrawing of borders and reshaping of society. So redrawing of borders was the military action. They have changed the shape of those countries. And reshaping of society was changing your identity. Unfortunately, what we see in Pakistan today, as a result of this constant bombardment of propaganda that we have imbibed, we speak the same narrative, we take the same narrative, we take their narrative, tweak it a bit, and it becomes our narrative. So today, you find many young people are apologetic about their identity and about their religion, about Islam, because this has been drilled into their heads that if you are practicing Muslim, if you follow what the Quran Sharif tells you, you are a fundamentalist, and which is not a good thing. Religion is a personal matter, and it's not for society.
What would you say about the Indian actions against social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook? They have officially asked these organizations to take down the content that is considered as inimical to the government of India.
Absolutely. And I'll give you another example. Why Pakistan is pushed around and India is not. I'll give you example of this human rights agenda, which is not actually human rights agenda. This is to have ingress into your society and have people who will do their bidding, espionage, everything, sabotage. It's a whole package. INGOs. When we came to know, and there was plenty of evidence that many INGOs were either involved in espionage, sabotage, or basically trying to undermine Pakistani culture and values, undermine our way of thinking, our national cohesion. We took action, and what happened? They came down like a ton of bricks, and from European leaders, President Obama, Chancellor Merkel, and British Prime Minister, everyone, don't touch them. And we said, these are non-governmental organizations. Let them fight their case. Why are you jumping in? One European minister said in the parliament, where we do not have intelligence resources in Pakistan, our INGOs step in and they collect and provide information to us. India threw out 9,000 INGOs, just like that, and not a squeak. So I think part of blame lies with us also. We buckle under pressure.
You also once intervened when the foreign minister was being interviewed in India, and you told the anchor to stop it. What was that? Can you tell us something about that?
I think he mentioned that incident in his book also. Again, it was not something extraordinary. With Arnab Goswami, you can imagine how he behaved. Because he had this reputation, I was a spokesperson and accompanying the foreign minister in that capacity. So I was filtering and accepting the interviews, requests for interviews. So he approached and he requested. I said, look, you are rather rude, and that is not acceptable to us. If you interview the foreign minister, you will have to be civil with him. And he said, yes, I will be, and you will have no complaint, nothing. And if I I said I would cut the interview if you. And he said, absolutely, I will be. And this was soon after the Samjhota terrorist attack, where they killed Pakistanis, more than 40 Pakistanis, in the train terrorist attack. And not just that, later on, of course we knew there was some involvement. Later on, it was the BJP RSS, it was their army, serving army officers were involved. And in that atmosphere, he kept attacking Pakistan, that you are sponsoring terrorists, and this incident also, Lashkar-e-Taiba. So I told him, I said, behave. And he continued. So I took the mics off, I said, out.
It's quite interesting conversation with Ambassador Tasneem Aslam. Viewers, I think you could figure out that she stood up where was needed, that she thinks the external interference also leads to compromises on the national sovereignty, undermines the rule of law, good governance, and it creates a situation in which American Marines moved in and out of Pakistan with impunity under General Pervez Musharraf. So he had apparently provided them a blank check, which went on unchecked for quite some time. But then there were also people within the system who challenged this blatant abuse of authority, blatant use of permission that had been granted to the American forces as part of the Operation Enduring Freedom that had been launched in Afghanistan. Thank you very much and enjoy the interview.